Hey, how's everybody doing out there? This is Med School Mike, and I'm with my good friend Amanda, and we're going to talk about kind of our journeys, about how we got accepted into medical school and the tactics that we use. How you doing today, Amanda?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, fantastic, and I can't wait to just share our stories with everybody out there. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. You kind of mentioned to me a little bit about being a non-traditional student, kind of like me. I think you said maybe not as non-traditional as me, but yeah, maybe you could just give us a little insight into your background.
Sure. So I've known that I wanted to be a doctor for as long as I can remember. And I've tried to do as much as I could to keep steering myself in the right direction. It all started when I was a gymnast and I saw a lot of injuries and found them to be fascinating, which seems weird, but if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. I thought casts were the coolest things, and I always wanted one just because they were so interesting to me. And my mom told me that an orthopedic surgeon is the one who puts on casts. So from that moment, I was dead set on orthopedics, and that's changed a little now. But I graduated high school pretty young. I was always the gifted kid, and got to college and fell on my face. But I made it through, and I spent the last year and a half working on my applications and studying for the Mcat, and I got accepted in October. So I'm
That's
excited to
fantastic.
start.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you got accepted into a school. Would that be kind of your top choice school that you got accepted into? Would you call it that?
I would. So I got accepted into Michigan State's osteopathic program, and that was my number one choice. I've always found DOs to be fascinating, and I liked their holistic approach to medicine. So I was really excited when I got in. Uh, I would say I'm pretty much done with my application cycle, just because I got into my top school, but I'm still waiting to hear back on some interviews and who knows.
Oh, yeah, you never know, right? Congratulations again. I know that it's an exciting time because you got a whole new world opening up for you and a lot to learn, that's for sure. But I'm really glad that you got in, and I hope that I was some kind of help with you or to you during that process.
You definitely were.
Well, thank you. So yeah, let's kind of dive into. I guess first we should talk about what it was like for you preparing for the MCAT. I know you said, kind of quoting, but you had a little bit of trouble in college and university, and that was something that uh, you thought was kind of a rough area for you in your application. So when it came to preparing for the MCAT, what kind of tactics or studying techniques did you employ to be successful at the MCAT?
Yeah, so I would say I am the poster child for Ncat study programs. I've tried all of them. I did Kaplan first, and I definitely didn't take it very seriously, but I also didn't find it to be that helpful to me. I wasn't really sure what was going on, and I wasn't as focused on it as I should have been. Um, so I didn't really enjoy that. And then a year later, I did that when I was like my senior year of undergrad. Um, then a few months later, I guess it was a few months, not a year, I invested in the Princeton Review because I heard really good reviews on it from a few other people. Um, and it was definitely better for me than Kaplan, but it still wasn't exactly what I needed. And I didn't, again, put as much effort into it as I should have. And it was just too cookie cutter for what I needed. So you were actually the one who introduced me to integrative MCAT tutoring, but I didn't realize what it was at the time. And my now husband was recommending that I look into a private tutor. And I ended up being reached out to by this program's lead, CM, and she got me in her program immediately. And I noticed a stark difference in how helpful it was to me.
Yeah.
Um, the way her program works is you attend the classes that are recommended to you and you follow a study course that is pretty personalized to what you need. You can put as much into it as you want to, and that's how much you're going to get out of it. And it was a lot less of a cookie cutter, one size fits all program. I ended up doing some individual tutoring as well with one of the instructors. One of the things that I liked the best is that there were different instructors for each subject as well. So if that's something that you're looking for, if you need more of an individualized instruction, this is a great program for you.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Some other things that I found to be helpful were making Anki decks, which my tutor helped me make because I hadn't heard of Anki before. And the repetition, but like I hate the tediousness of making like written flashcards. So I wasn't super interested in doing that, but I can customize the Anki decks to what I needed and put as much into them as I wanted to, which I enjoyed. I postponed my Mcat twice. So because I just wasn't seeing results until pretty close to my test date. Side note, I was also diagnosed with ADHD 3 weeks before I took my Mcat. So having been diagnosed and starting to take medication, I noticed a huge difference in my performance. And I finally mustered up the gumption to take it, and that was it. I only had to take it once. So yay.
That's awesome. Also, it's a really great use of the word gumption. I don't really hear that a lot anymore. So, thumbs up for that. Yeah, my MCAT my MCAT was postponed twice as well, but it was kind of out of my hands. The whole COVID thing was literally just starting. Yeah, that whole thing. And that's something that it's kind of a tricky area. I know a lot of people like to postpone their MCAT. I know I was kind of happy that mine was postponed, but a lot of people like to postpone it because they think that's going to give them more time to study. And it does give you more time to study, but I also learned that, by postponing it, you start to actually forget some of the stuff you learned in the beginning. Did you find that to be an issue at all?
I definitely found that to be an issue. And I also found that like I was definitely dealing with a lot of burnout, having just been in constant academia my whole life and like then going on and continuing to study. And I personally wasn't super built for that. But it just prolonged my burnout and I lost so much motivation. Like it wasn't until my ADHD diagnosis that I felt that I could actually do it. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not dumb. I just, needed something extra to keep me going in the right direction. And with a lot of support from family, especially my husband, and from my awesome tutors, I was able to get it done. So
That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
congratulations.
I don't think postponing is always the right choice. I think it's better to take it, see where you're at, and if you need to keep working on it, then keep working on it and go from where you were. But sometimes you don't need to take it again. So
Yeah.
always luck out in that way.
Yeah, I mean, for me, kind of preparing for the MCAT, I have a little bit of ADD too, I think, and I'm also a big fan of like trying to replicate the environment of testing day as much as possible. So I'm trying to get as like I wanted to remove as many distractions as possible, and kind of make it more like a testing environment. So this is kind of corny, I guess. But what I actually did is I took like a cardboard box and like cut it down the middle and made like a little like study divider, kind of like they have in the testing center a little bit, like your own little cubicle kind of a thing. And I would just what I would do is I would study in between these cardboard walls, like again, like they were like a cubicle in the testing center. So, I tried to do that. I did, of course, use the study program that you're talking about. I kind of discovered it a little bit later in the process of my MCAT prep, but I'm glad I did discover it because, yeah, I took Kaplan, and no negative things against Kaplan, but it just wasn't a good fit for me. I just didn't see any improvement on kind of my practice tests, and just in a, kind of a situation of really needing some kind of guidance or help because I kind of felt a little lost during that. So I started like going online and like searching for tutors, but it turns out tutors for the MCAT, like one-on-one, are pretty expensive.
Pretty pricey, yeah.
Yeah,
As
very
is
pricey.
pretty much anything related to med school.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there making a lot of money off applicants. But yeah, I kind of found it accidentally through Ant, and I met CM as well online. And yeah, her program was phenomenal. You do get to work with tutors one-on-one if you want to, but they, like you were talking about, they kind of break subjects down into, each subject, and you'll meet with kind of an expert in that area and go over practice questions, talk about the most high yield topics. I know that some of the people from Mcat tutoring, integrative Mcat tutoring, they actually take the Mcat each year, so they know what's going to be on it, and they can kind of tell you like, oh, it's not really physics heavy this year, or whatever, So I found it to be really helpful as well. Another kind of silly thing is I also would like, I don't even know why I share this story, it's so silly, but I looked online and I was like, is there any type of color ink I can write in that will help me like remember better? Or, you say blue, I say red. It is. Yeah, I read this study just, in a Google search, and it said that people seem to remember information when they write in red ink, like, I don't know, 5% better or something like that. So, yeah, I don't know if it's true or not, but now I just kind of, everything I write is in red ink. So, yeah, I guess that just speaks to both of us trying to find like anything or whatever the best path is that we can make this information stick and retain it, because it was a lot to prepare for the Mcat. I felt pretty overwhelmed. I mean, what did you feel like during that Mcat prep process?
I'm sure I can speak for most Mcat takers when I say the amount of mental breakdowns that I had was what some would consider severe. There were a lot of nights just crying and like not knowing if I could actually do it, and feeling completely hopeless and wondering if that was the right career choice, thinking I'll just be a stay-at-home mom, like just not actually seeing the light on the other side of the tunnel. It was really nice to have people who were supportive and were like, what you're feeling right now is completely normal. And part of getting through this is what will build your character up enough to get through med school. Even from doctors who were like, once you take this, you'll never have to take another test like this again. I was like, okay, yeah, that makes me feel a little bit better, not gonna lie. And that was actually something that came up in my interview. But feeling hopeless was a common theme, especially when you take practice test after practice test and your score stays the same, and you try something new and it blows up in your face. Like, so many times I just wanted to quit. So that's why I owe it all to the people who supported me and kept me going, because I would not be here without them.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds all too familiar to me. I felt the same way. It's like you try to search for some kind of information or somebody that's been through it before, just gotta get an idea of, should I be feeling this way? I feel like I'm so dumb, or I feel like I'm completely lost while I'm preparing because I just don't know what to expect. Should I be getting these practice test scores? Because, for me in the beginning, I was actually, honestly, for most of my study time, I was getting like terrible practice test scores.
Terrible. Mine were terrible. Like the two times I broke 500, I texted my mom and my husband. I was like, I finally broke 500.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
so envious of all the people who I have a friend, she took the Mcat and was going to apply to med schools, but is taking a year off, which is good for her. And we were talking about it right after I took mine. She's like, yeah, I took that. She's like, I think I got a 517. And I was like, you think you got a 517?
Wow.
You don't know? I would be shouting from the rooftops, I got a 517 on the Mcat. Like, is it just that nonchalant for some people? I cannot relate. I struggled. I fought for my score. Like, crazy to me. And I was so envious of those people on Reddit threads. Don't go down those rabbit holes of, oh yeah, if I only got a 510. Bro, I would kill for a 509. Like,
yeah, same kind of thing on my end, in terms of like just practice tests were I wasn't hitting those scores that I wanted to, especially like the first couple or 3 or 4 months, and it was really demoralizing. It was very stressful, and that's another thing I kind of want to tell people out there is like, don't even like, Reddit's great. I'm not saying don't look at Reddit. Reddit has a lot of really good resources.
Yeah,
exactly, right. It can be really helpful, but
at the same time, it's kind of like not the best thing to see, you know, threads or comments after comments about how like, oh, I just got a 523 today. I'm trying to get that 525 or whatever, you know. It's like, okay,
Good for you.
I guess, is that normal? I don't feel like a normal test taker now, but yeah. So Reddit's a little, it's kind of like a gray area. I wouldn't necessarily buy too much into it. If anybody is on, you know, Reddit, the Mcat forums, just know like some people lie. Actually, a lot of people lie. So yes, some people got some great scores and they want to talk about it, but you know, I think some people are on there just kind of messing with people's heads a little bit, which is, I don't know if that's.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just if you're doing something, you're doing something. So keep working in whatever way you can. I always had to keep like the self-affirmations, like you're still doing more than nothing. So just keep trucking.
Keep going. And that's
Something you just brought up a little bit ago too. You know, the way that you kind of felt after some of these more bad practice test scores. I was there. I've been there. I felt the same way. But it's about picking yourself up right when you get knocked down and going back into the battle or going back into that test. No matter how much you kind of dread it or the kind of, you know, post-traumatic stress you experience from that score.
The thought of taking it right now,
yeah, it doesn't sound too good to me either.
But yeah, that's a great characteristic, what you need to have as a physician and going into this doctor field. You definitely have to have that because, you know, throughout the rest of our lives, we're going to be having those kind of tough situations and we can't just give up. I think that's something that, you know, you learned and something I learned in the academic world doing that as well.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was
So,
sorry.
No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say a common theme that I see in a lot of pre-meds is we all very much depend on academic validation. And it's very humbling to go through an experience like the Mcat where you have to rely on your own validation for once and just get through it. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I know it's very much like it's not a team sport. It's just you basically, and it's a real test of your ability to do this test. I mean, it's like man against test. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a very sobering experience sometimes. The Mcat is. So you worked, you studied really hard. You got some advice from some of your mentors, some of your peers. Hopefully, with some good advice. I hope I was able to help you out a little bit along the way. Doing all this hard work, and then comes test day. How did you feel on test day?
Like I wanted to vomit. And I'm not a puker, so that says a lot for me. I had practiced all of my practice tests at the same time of day that my actual test was going to be. I picked an early morning test because I'm much more of I perform better in the morning. So I remember driving there, finding the place, putting my few belongings in my locker, you know, getting all checked in and standing at the line, you know, you walk back into the test center and this kid next to me was going over physics equations, like whispering them to himself. And that made me feel horrible because, you know, my brain pulled a blank and I couldn't even remember the formulas he was reciting. And then I remembered, I don't know why he's trying to remember those because there probably won't be that much physics on our test. But once I got in there and I started, I felt okay. I didn't feel as queasy. I made it through, you know, the chem phys section fairly unscathed. Everything came crashing down in cars. So the second section, and I felt like all the questions were long and then all of the answers were long and there was just so much reading and I completely ran out of time to the extent that I couldn't answer any questions for the last 2 passages because I ran out of time, which was mortifying because I had never had that problem on any practice test.
Yeah.
And so I spent the next 2 sections trying to figure out in my brain what the heck went wrong. Why did I get so caught up in all of those things? Why did I run out of time? And that definitely took a lot of my focus away from the following 2 sections, which was also disappointing. there was a lot of time spent beating myself up, but when I finished it, I tried to remind myself that feeling this way is probably normal, and I'm not the only one who I can't be the only one who felt this way. And luckily, my husband had planned a vacation for us that weekend. So I went home, we packed up the car, and we went on a vacation for a few days to try and keep my mind off of the poo show that had gone down. The day was rough and exhausting. But I was really just proud of myself for getting through it. I didn't cry, so that's also a positive. And everyone was so proud of me for even getting it done, because like they had seen the toll that this test had taken on me. So everyone was like, you did it, cool, put it out of your brain for 30 days to celebrate that you finished it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was in the same boat. When I was taking the test, it was like going through it, I did hit a couple stumbles, right? I hit a couple roadblocks, and then the trick I learned is, and it's not easy to do, but it's just like to keep pushing forward as hard as you can and try to forget about those 3 questions you ran out of time or 5 questions you ran out of time on. And it's definitely, it's a harder thing to do. It doesn't get easier, but yeah, you got to keep moving forward and make sure you can finish the test. And that being said, when I was taking the test, I actually got to my last section. It was Psych Soc, I believe, right? It's our last section. And I think I just sped, like I was running out of time. I had like a minute or 2 left. So like the last 10 questions, I just had to like guess on, just like putting in answers and like flying through. I couldn't even read the questions. And when I walked out of the testing center, yeah, I believed that I completely bombed this test. And that was like, I'm the dumbest, person in the world, whatever. Like I felt so stupid. You know what? You're ugly too. And it's like, so I had like that whole meltdown.
Hammering it all in.
Yeah, exactly. And I
called, the owner of the integrative Mcat tutoring, or she called me or asked me, because they're pretty in touch with like what our schedule is when we're taking the test and stuff. She's like texting me like, how'd you think you did? And I was like, failed. That's it. Like I don't want to talk about it. Like it just was horrible.
I think I just sent sad faces. Like I sent a bunch of sad face emojis. She's like, really? And I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
She said this. She said, no, that's a good thing because. And I heard this before too, but she's like, that's a good thing. No, usually when you think you did horrible, you actually did like a lot better than you did, and you probably did really well. And to her credit, she was right, but I didn't know that yet. So I was still just kind of in my own little mental meltdown. I didn't cry, but I was thinking like, if I was a crier, I'd definitely be crying right now,
I went home,
drove home, and I sat on the couch, and I didn't get off. I just lay down and I woke up the next morning, so I was just there all night because I was so in a weird state of mind because of that. But yeah, and when you were preparing, you also mentioned that it sounded like you tried to emulate kind of a testing environment or testing day situation by taking the test at the same time.
I ate the same food. I took the same bathroom breaks, and I just turned my phone off for pretty much the whole day, because who was giving me tips? Someone was giving me tips for this. Here's how you set up. It was one of the tutors. Here's what I recommend you do. Emulate your test day as much as you can. Wake up at the same time. Follow the same routine. Because this was about a month out. So at this point, I was taking practice tests every weekend, and yeah. Same food, I drank a liquid IV in the morning, before the test, and then had the same pee breaks, and then drank water and ate the same banana and protein bar, just to keep it all the same.
Yeah, I did a similar thing. I even went out, I didn't go out, but on Amazon, and I tried to buy some nutritious, dense, foods for my brain basically during the breaks, so I could just cram food in my mouth, and I was literally running down the hallway to get back to the testing center, running to the bathroom. Yeah, you too?
Yeah.
Exactly. I know, it was hectic, and that clock's always ticking, so trying to hustle and get the test done. But yeah, it was a little bit of a shock when I walked out of it. I thought I completely bombed it, but I ended up doing a little bit well, a lot of bit better than I thought. So, and it worked out. We both are in a good position now. And again, like I said, congratulations to getting accepted. Yeah, so let's move on to the application process. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about, you did mention your background a little bit. College was a little bit tricky for you. So what do you want to share with us about kind of your application in terms of like maybe grades or anything that you want to share?
I will share all of it. So, um, I graduated high school with a 4.0 and moved on to college. I was young. I graduated high school when I was 16. So I hadn't fully developed. And um college, my first semester of college, I got a 3.3 GPA, which was a smack in the face for someone who had always done very well. I quickly realized that this was what my 16-year-old brain thought. I'm not busy enough. I should add more to my plate, to kind of focus on what I'm doing. And everyone who knew me was like, that's crazy. But it did work. You know, 5-6 years later, we find out I have ADHD. But I got a job working at a physical therapy clinic because I thought, well, I can learn and I can get patient contact hours and also be busy enough to focus on my studies. So I ended up, pulling my GPA out of the gutter a little bit. I graduated with a 3.56 cumulative GPA. According to the AAMC, my science GPA was a 3.3 and my cumulative GPA was like a 3.52. So they bumped it down even further. And that was gut-wrenching because I'm thinking like, great, I have no chance. This is a very low GPA, which it's not. I had to keep reminding myself, this is very academically appropriate. Like, this is a great GPA. I should not be beating myself up about this, but as we all know, what you see in the pre-med community is everyone's, complaining about their 3.8s, and you're like, that's so good. That's perfection.
Exactly. It's A I have, it's not an A plus. Yeah.
Right. So, applying, I was really nervous, and I had even been told by my personal doctor that my grades weren't where they needed to be to become a doctor, and that I should look into PA school. No, that's not what I want to do. So, I did as much as I could to round out my application because I didn't stick out in any specific areas. So I have extensive volunteer experience with a program called the Civil Air Patrol. It's the United States Air Force Auxiliary. It's a volunteer military program that you can join as a 12-year-old and stay in it forever. Through this program, I've gained a lot of leadership experience. I've had multitudes of opportunities that you just don't happen to come by in everyday life. I was able to serve as a medical officer at our, week-long training camp for our cadets. I've been in different leadership roles. I've started new initiatives within the program. So I had a whole lot to add to my application through that. And I was even advised against forming my application the way I did.
It's interesting.
Because of everything I had based around this one program.
Yeah.
But I ended up going with my gut, and it worked out in my favor. Just because there were so many different aspects of this program, I felt that they all deserved their own activity title. So that's how I ended up writing about all of the different things I did in the program. I hadn't done any formal research. I really didn't have that much medical volunteer hours because I never volunteered in a hospital or whatever, but I've worked in the medical field for 5 years now, having been a physical therapy technician for 4 years. I was a scribe for 6 months. It didn't end very well just because the company wasn't great, but I loved scribing, thought it was an invaluable experience. And now my current job, I work as a receptionist at the same physical therapy clinic. I verify health insurance, I work with scheduling, and I work with other physicians referring patients to our clinic. So that's given me, I feel like, a pretty well-rounded experience working in the healthcare field. I listed my a few other extracurriculars related to horses because I'm an equestrian and I rode competitively in college and volunteered at a horse farm, like a rescue farm, for 2 years. So I tried to just diversify my application as much as I could because I didn't stick out in any particular areas. Like my Mcat wasn't anything to be super stoked about. My GPA was in pre-med terms below average. Like I was very nervous going into it. But I think all of the different things that I have done brought it all together to show I know what I'm doing and I know that this is what I'm supposed to do and I can be a doctor and I can make it through med school despite what my what's it called? My stats say, you know?
Yeah.
And my letters of recommendation, I think, really pulled their weight with the schools I applied to because of the program because of Civil Air Patrol, I was able to get 2 really, really great letters of recommendation from that program. One from the person in charge of the entire nation for the program, and I was able to get one from my boss, who I've worked for almost 4 years now, who's on the admissions committee for Wayne State's PT program. I shadowed a lot of different doctors in my time, you know, before getting into med school, one of which happens to be a clinical instructor for Michigan State's DO program. And he was able to write me a letter of recommendation. So I think if you can get some awesome letters of recommendation, I'm sure that it helps. So
Yeah, absolutely. That was amazing. Your whole description of your application process. I think you hit the nail on the head for a lot of that. One thing is like really trying to thoroughly explain weak spots in your application. I had the same thing. So like I had some bad grades from when I first started college. And because of that, I was always under this notion, I always kind of believed this idea that I'll never even meet the benchmark or the minimum requirement to even get looked at. So I was like, why would I apply to medical school? Because, you know, I have these old grades that are kind of holding me down. And I would like tell my parents that because they're like, you should apply, it's your dream. I was like, I don't know, I don't think I can. They won't even look at me because I have these old grades. And even though I, you know, improved as I went through, which, by the way, everybody out there, it's a big thing they look for is kind of upward trends. That's true. They actually do look for that. So it was kind of holding me down like mentally from actually going for this dream. But I got to a point where I wanted to not have any regret in life about not pursuing this dream of being a physician. So I decided to kind of roll the dice and go back to school to finish my degree. I had about 2.5 or 3 semesters left of classes, and I made a point to just do the best I could and to get straight A's. And it was challenging. You know, I was still working, but I was able to get those grades. And when it came to my application, that was a positive thing, I think. Just like, look, when he did go back to school, he showed academic rigor by being able to work and get, you know, A's in all these upper level science courses, which, you know, sometimes isn't the easiest thing to do. But that being said, I mean, my GPA, because of those older grades, were still, I think it was probably like a 3.3 or 3.4, you know, after the application process averages it out, which is kind of a big thing, right? I even talked about it. It's like a little bit discouraging. You're like, oh, but I had a 3.6. What happened? You know?
why did you say this?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's like a whole thing if people really haven't looked into that. If you've taken a class twice, for instance, I think they only take the first time you took it, something like that. Is that right? Yeah. So that's a whole other thing too. And I knew that, and I kind of just thought, well, I'm not going to meet the minimum requirements. But really, the truth is, they do look at your entire story, and you know, like you mentioned, your experiences. That's a huge selling point. I'm glad you were able to kind of share that with us, because that is really going to help kind of define your story of who you are. I mean, everybody can say they want to be a doctor, right? But you have to show them, you know, what in your history shows that you want to be a doctor. Like, you can't just say that to me, you know, actions speak louder than words. And it sounds like you had some good experiences with that.
I really did. And I think especially speaking about your story, your personal statement is something that really can pull everything in your application together. And I was fortunate enough to use the same tutors I used for the Mcat, who helped me draft and produce my personal statement. And it's probably one of the writing tasks that I've had in my life that I'm the most proud of, because I didn't even really believe that I was able to do it, after taking the Mcat and everything, until I wrote my personal statement and was reading through it, and I was like, dang, no, I do have what it takes to do this.
I thought the same thing, I did. Like, I was like, all right, okay, this might be all right.
I got this.
Let's see what happens. And I think that's a big thing too. I noticed, like, you always hear these cliche stories about how super underprivileged people escaped some war-torn country and then made it to America, and they're like, what an amazing story. And it is, it's an amazing story. They get into medical school and they succeed and then they cure some disease. And it's like, that's great. That's the kind of people they want in medical school. They don't want me. They don't want this,
My survivor's guilt that I don't even need to have was ridiculous. I'm like, how am I supposed to write a personal statement? Nothing significant has happened to me. But upon some self-reflection, there is enough. And if you keep diving, you will find it, and it'll all come together and be like, oh yeah, I've overcome.
Absolutely. No, and that's the thing too. That's kind of what I was getting at is, the more that you think about it, you think about your story and the kind of story and how you want to tell it to best kind of illustrate your life and describe kind of the experiences that you've had that really built you into this strong applicant, this person that without a doubt absolutely wants to be a physician, and this is a calling for them. If you can just reflect, right? Just like you said, you're going to be able to come up with your story, and not making it up, but the story that conveys to the applications committee or the medical school acceptance committee that you belong here. And it just takes a little bit of time. It just takes some thinking about it. And again, like in the beginning, I thought I don't have any great profound story. But the more you think about it, you're like, what, I did do some things that can really show that. And it's kind of like I always heard one way, if you're standing in front of an medical school acceptance committee or whatever, which I don't know if people really do that nowadays, but it's like you say you want to be a doctor. Why do you want to be a doctor? And then the applicant replies, because I want to help people. And then they're flipping through their application, looking at it, and they're like, well, I don't see anything in here that shows you want to help people. You can say it, but I got to see, where did you volunteer at? How many years did you do that? So definitely being able to convey that story, and you can do that in the personal statement, which you just were talking about, and the experiences as well. Leadership is a huge thing in the experience section, and in the application, they're definitely looking for leaders. So if you can get that across, would you agree?
I would definitely agree. That is one of the common themes that I heard, throughout discussing my application with different doctors and current medical students. I'm like, I don't really know how to tie all of this together. I mean, I have all these experiences, and they're like, well, what leadership experience do you have? And I'm like, oh, let me tell you all of my leadership experience. And being able to apply it in different medical situations was huge. So leadership, I think, is one of the biggest attributes you can have as an applicant.
Absolutely. So when it came to your personal statement, by the way, same boat, and I think all applicants are, especially successful applicants, you kind of start out writing this thing, and it's like most rough drafts, it's not looking too good, right? You're not really sure what to put in there. At least in my case, I was like, what points do I want to hit on? Because you're only allowed a certain amount of words, or
Yeah.
Exactly. So
if you can remember, how did your final draft look compared to like your first draft? Like how did you improve it? What areas did you focus on in that? Anything you can remember about your personal statement?
So, like I mentioned before, with the tutors, they were really helpful in starting me off. They gave me a few different tasks, like activities to do, that helped identify the different points that I wanted to make in my personal statement. Having the tutors give me activities to use to identify what points I would be making was really helpful. That way I was able to realize what experiences I had that led me to overcome. So they helped me identify what exactly I had that showed that I could be a doctor. And my first draft looks extremely different than my final draft. But having someone who knew what the admissions committee was looking for, review it with me and refine it was really helpful. So
yeah, same here. I didn't get to use the tutors at or the guidance from that Mcat integrated program that we both used, but I did use a few people in the know, in the circle of like, what they should be, what the medical schools are, expecting. So yeah, I was able to kind of bounce my personal statement off them, and they would write back and be like, no, we gotta, go this different direction, explain this part of your life. And so my first draft was not so great. And then I kind of did a bunch of research and again, some advice. And what I did was I kind of stumbled on this idea of, making it a narrative, tell a story, draw your reader in. And that's
tell your story.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's how I started it out, and I'll share another video, my personal statement, but it was very narrative. It sounds a little corny, but it was like, the sun's rising over a field in rural Michigan, or something like that. And like, it's kind of just trying to draw them in. So
Yeah. Mine was like along the lines of a young gymnast who wasn't really thriving was, thrust into a world of academia. Like it highlighted parts of my application that I really wasn't able to talk about anywhere else. And showed the development of my character and why I can be a doctor and why I should be a doctor. And it was nice to have it put in perspective for me that way, having really no idea what I was supposed to be doing in the first place. So I would say researching what it's supposed to look like is really beneficial, so that it doesn't just look like here are the facts about me. Like, that's not what they're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's also a good place to kind of explain any of those rough spots that you or anyone thinks they have in their application, So like if I did have some bad grades, I made sure to talk about how, I was taking care of a sick family member at that time, and school wasn't necessarily my priority. So it's a good place to kind of explain some of those areas of your application that may need explaining to medical schools. The personal statement I knew was going to be a big thing for me, and I knew I had to get my story across to them. So I spent a good deal of time. I had several drafts, and then it got to a point where I had about 3 people I could bounce it off of, ask for some input, like, do you think is this good? What do you think I should do to it? And I'd email to them, they'd email me back, and it would end up, it kind of got to a point where it was done pretty much, except each 3 of them had a different opinion about how it should end, and it's like, there's no right way. So I just decided, I'm just going to decide for myself.
I'm going to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. What's best for me is what I was thinking. And I was like, all right. And so I think again, it might be a little lame, but I ended it with a quote from Confucius. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or something like that.
I have heard really good things about like appropriately placed quotes. They can have a really good effect on the reader. But I agree with you. For me, my personal statement was huge, and I knew that from the beginning because my application to me seemed so weak. And I'm like, I really got to draw them in with my personal statement, and I did put a lot of effort into it, and I did really love it at the end. And I was excited to have people read it and tell me what they thought, and especially the admissions committees. So
yeah. So Amanda, you go through this whole process, the whole application, filling it out, which is an ordeal. It's an ordeal on its own.
Especially when you're planning a wedding. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's no better time. So you go through this whole process, and I've been there, as you know. You submit it, and then you're in this limbo, right? Maybe I can speak to that a little bit. I felt like I was in this area of just like, well, here's my baby, I'll send it over to you, and maybe I'll hear something, like I hope so. And you kind of just like waiting, you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And what happens next for you, or what happened next to you after you submitted your application? How long did it take generally before you started hearing from schools? Did you hear good news right off the bat? Was it mixed or?
So I submitted my primary applications pretty soon. I had heard from someone who applied twice that timing is everything. So I was really busting my butt to get them submitted as soon as I could. And I immediately started getting secondaries back. I don't think there was a single school I applied to that didn't offer, like, extend a secondary to me. That was when I really understood how difficult the process was, because all of the secondaries are so similar, yet so different at the same time. And it was really difficult to have to rearrange my answers to different essay questions that were off by just like half of a word or whatever. And I really struggled with submitting my secondaries. But this was also, like I said, while I was planning my wedding and having different wedding related events, it was a very hectic time, and really no one understood it quite like I did. Yeah. So there was one secondary that I submitted as soon as humanly possible, and that was my secondary to the school that I got accepted to.
Top choice school. Say that.
Top choice school. Right. And I think that had a huge impact on when I was offered an interview, which was 2 months after I submitted it, which still felt like an eternity. So I understand what you're saying about the limbo. You feel like, okay, now what? And then you get secondaries back and you're like, cool, more. And you're working on those for, every spare minute you have, trying to get them submitted, but also not wanting to sound stupid in your answers. And that was an exhausting process all on its own. And if I'm being honest, there were about 4 schools that I never even submitted my secondaries to, because I just was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't think it's worth it for me to do it. So.
Yeah, same, similar kind of thing here. I knew that was going to be one of the biggest factors, was timing, right? If you can get that secondary in as soon as humanly possible, as soon as it opens up, or in the application too, you want to get it in ASAP. And that was something I made a focus on, especially with, my top choice schools. Got it in like the second it opened, basically, or was able to turn it in. And yeah, I applied to a lot of schools. I mean, I wanted to get into medical school this year. It was my first time applying, but getting a little bit older, 34 or 33 at the time, when I was going through the application process. So I was like, this is it. It's going to happen now, or it's not going to happen. So I think I applied to like 30 schools or something. Schools I didn't even really want to go to. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's this like huge stigma around applying to medical school. I mean, first of all, it's expensive as hell. Like there's so many fees all factored into it. Yeah. And the more schools you apply to, the more it's going to cost. And it got to the point where I was like, I really only care to go to about 5 of the schools that I applied to. And I think I applied to a total of 12, and 5 of them were out of state. And those were the ones I didn't even submit the secondaries to, because I had talked to you about it. I was like, is it even worth it at this point? Like, I don't want to go there. Even if I got in, like that would be a huge change. And I mean, my husband was applying to some jobs that would have been local to those schools. So it would have worked out had, all of the stars aligned. But by then I had already gotten an interview extended to me, and before the secondary deadlines came around, I had already gotten my acceptance. So I was like, at this point, I've made my decision, and I don't want to waste my time and money submitting these extra applications.
Yeah, no, it can be very, very expensive. It is kind of a roll of the dice too. But you did get that email or that call about interview. So how'd you feel when you got the interview call? It felt pretty good, I'm sure, right?
I was overjoyed. It happened to be the day before my wedding. So there was a lot of emotions. But I remember sprinting up the stairs and wrapping my husband in the biggest hug. I was just like, this is a win. Like it just takes one. And I got the interview, and then I started to panic. I was like, oh my God, we're about to go on our honeymoon. When am I supposed to schedule this? And I'm like looking it up, and doing it all. And sure enough, it was scheduled during my honeymoon. But I was like, I can use that to my advantage. And yeah, just hearing that I got an interview was enough to send me to the moon overjoyed. Like it was great.
Yeah, I was super geeked too. Hey, where did you go on your honeymoon?
I went to Hawaii.
I knew it. It was someplace beautiful. So did you get to use like a really beautiful background? Like
A real one or just the
I
hotel
didn't
room?
want to be overzealous, so I did use the immaculate painting in our resort room. But it was one of the first things that came up. But yeah, just getting the interview and knowing like it just takes one to go. And I was so excited because I had been telling people like my application isn't that strong and I just want to talk to someone. Like I just want to tell them about myself and show them in person or over Zoom or whatever that I can do this. And so that was my golden ticket. I was like, yes, I have this opportunity to really show them who I am. So yeah, I was very excited.
Very excited. Was there any tips you can share about how you prepared for the interview? Any advice you got from anybody?
Well, I forgot to pack a business outfit. So I went shopping in Hawaii and got a business outfit. And my husband was impeccable at preparing me for this interview. He has, in his current job, he's worked a lot in hiring. So, and having been in a lot of job interviews himself, he knows a lot of good questions that they can ask. And so we really did a lot of introspective thinking on like, who am I as a person? What are my strengths and weaknesses? He's like, what if they ask you this question? So just bouncing ideas off of each other, preparing for the few days leading up to it, like while we're driving around the island, like, okay, so what if they ask you this? And how are you going to explain this? So having someone who has either been through the application process, or he even took it upon himself to look up interview questions that are typically asked by medical school admissions committees. So having someone who can, do mock interviews with you is very, very useful. And I did feel a lot more comfortable going into it. Also, the fact that he was in the other room was comforting to me.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a few things that you had to kind of think on the fly with, like getting your a good suit or good outfit for the interview. And you did it via Zoom, obviously, when you're in Hawaii. I also had to do it via Zoom, and it was, I think, the first year that they did that kind of widespread. So, kind of getting into the habit of looking into the camera and not, at the screen or somewhere else, wherever, which I'm probably doing there this whole time we're talking right now. But yeah, there's a few things that, I had to kind of adjust for with the Zoom format. But that being said, the first interview that I did was with a school in Denver, Colorado, and yeah, it was. I thought I was good because I'm like, I even told some people, I'm like, look, I'm more mature. I got this. I've been in interviews before. It's just no big deal. Like, it's nothing. It's cool. Like I got an interview. I'm in. It's no worries. And yeah, so yeah, I'm stupid. So that was not a smart thing to think because I got into this interview and I just wasn't as smooth as I thought. I think I'm a little bit better maybe in person. I don't know what it is, but I definitely didn't prepare as much as I should. Like I thought I prepared, but really I didn't treat it like I treated the application process, or I didn't treat it like the Mcat. I just thought, oh, I'll handle this interview. It's not going to be an issue at all. But no. One of the biggest questions that I struggled with a little bit at first, and not just in the interview, but actually like figuring out what I wanted to say for it was, hey, Michael, how you doing? Hey, why don't you tell me about yourself? And it's like, oh, it's an easy enough question, but it's like,
until you're asked, and you're like, oh no, I'm a person.
Yeah, exactly.
I've done things. Please let me in. So did you? You sounded like you practiced some of those type of questions, and it is a little bit of kind of figuring out what to say and doing so concisely, without kind of beating around the bush at stuff, just getting your story across.
Yeah, we did practice a lot of those routine questions just so I would feel comfortable answering. And he started off, my interviewer, what I liked about my school, the way that they did their interview process is it was a blind interview. So my interviewer had no idea who I was, didn't know any of my stats. They just wanted to know who I was as a person, which I was very comforted by that. And he asked me where I was from. And that's when I tied in, oh, well, I'm actually, born and raised in Michigan, something that I had practiced with my husband. And I was like, but currently I'm in Hawaii on my honeymoon. And it divulged into this awesome conversation of, no way, I was in Hawaii in March. And, what island are you on? And, just getting comfortable with each other, getting to know each other a little bit more. And that took a lot of the pressure off. And I really felt like I was having a conversation with someone who was similar to me. So the more I got into the interview, the more comfortable I felt, and the more I was able to be like, I really feel like I'd be a good fit at this school just based on how well this interview is going. But I also didn't want to get too cocky, and I stumbled over some words here and there. But I had, practiced the questions I was going to ask at the end, and had different answers loaded in the back of my mind for whatever questions were thrown my way. So
yeah, that's the way to do it. I think it is a very good idea to have some practiced answers. I mean, you don't want to sound like a robot answering, it's obvious that this is what you're trying to say, but just kind of just be smooth like that. And one more thing, are you trying to suggest that we should all do our interviews from Hawaii? Is that?
Oh yes, 100%. Please, it's a great conversation starter.
This process just got a little bit more expensive then. Yeah. Okay, so you do this interview, you feel very comfortable with it, you're happy, it went really well for you, you feel like, and then how much longer did you have to wait before you heard back from your top choice?
So after the interview process, we were sent, all the applicants were sent some information, and I was able to attend a seminar that was like, here's, what you're going to go through as an applicant, whatever. Yeah. And they said over the seminar that it would take around 4 weeks to get an answer. So my interview was September 14th, and I waited and waited, and October 14th came around, and I was like, well, shoot, this isn't good. I haven't heard anything yet. It's been 4 weeks. And my husband's like, okay, well, be patient. There's a lot going on in the world. And a week later, I got the call, and I was not expecting a phone call. But I was at the gym, and I had just gotten off the treadmill, and my phone rings, and I see this name. And it's a name that I recognize because I had met with this woman who's an admissions counselor for my school. I had met with her in undergrad on a whim, just to do it. But I recognized the name. So I'm breathing heavy because I just got off the treadmill. And I know who this is. And I'm like, oh God, all right, cool. So I answer the phone, and she's like, hey, Amanda, how are you? And, a billion things go through my brain. Okay, the way this is going to go is going to depend on the way she answers my question. I'm like, I'm good. How are you? And as soon as she said, I'm doing great, I knew. And I immediately started getting choked up. And she's like, I just really wanted to give you a call and let you know that we are pleased to offer you a position in the incoming class of 2026. And I'm getting chills right now. I just couldn't contain myself. I'm in the gym, in the public eye, bawling my eyes out. I can't even breathe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these people think I'm freaking crazy. So I keep saying out loud, wow, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Because I'm like, if anyone's watching me cry right now, they should at least know that this is a good thing, not a bad thing. And she's like, I know you're not retaining any of the information I'm giving you right now. So you'll be getting an email tomorrow. And that was that phone call. And I immediately called my husband, and I couldn't even get through it. I was like, he's like, what's up? And I'm like, I'm gonna doctor. Yeah. And he was at work, and he's being quiet. He's like, oh my gosh, yay, super happy for me. Awesome. And then starts the waterfall of telling everyone I know that I wanted to tell over the phone just because I couldn't contain my excitement. Yeah, best day ever.
Yeah, I remember you calling me, or I think, did you call or you texted anyway? You contacted me right away. and I was just as excited as you were because, I wanted to see you make it. I really believed that you were going to get into comm, and I would have been extremely surprised in a bad way if you hadn't. But when you did, I thought, now you get to start school in a few months, and that's pretty exciting stuff.
Yep, I am very excited. I should note, shout out to my husband. He did surprise me at the gym because he's like, go home. And I'm like, I can't. I have too much energy. I have to work out now.
So you finished your workout, I was going to ask.
Finished my workout, and he surprised me at the gym with the biggest bouquet of flowers I had ever seen in my life. And I kept it a secret from everyone that I wanted to tell in person because I wanted to record everyone's reactions. And it was such a great experience. I will never forget it. It was awesome.
Yeah. That is awesome. And was that the first school you got accepted to, or the only one that you heard at that point, or?
Yeah, that's it. I've gotten the, we're not going to extend an interview to you emails from my own alma mater and from 2 other schools. I'm still waiting on, I think, 4 schools to even give me an interview decision. But at this point, I've made my decision, and I'm very happy with where I'm going. It was my top choice, and so they can kick rocks for all.
Yeah, they can kick rocks.
Exactly. Yeah, I. So I'll just share real quick. I may have said this in a previous video, but yeah, that first interview that I was talking about that I did so poorly on, and I kind of walked out of it thinking like, that didn't feel too good, I don't know how that went. And I was like, then I talked myself up a little bit afterwards, like, no, that was okay, it was good. Like you did well. Don't worry.
Yeah, you rocked it.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was leaving the gym, and they got back pretty quickly. It was like 2 or 3 weeks after the interview happened, and they said they would do that. That was what they did normally. And I got an email from them, and they said, congratulations, Michael, you're going to be a doctor. You got accepted. Your life's going to be so much better. Oh, I don't know what they said, but some stuff along that lines, like, be happy, your life's great now.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is awesome. I got accepted to medical school. Like, no matter what happens, at least I got into a school, and I can always go to this school. Even if it wasn't my top choice or like a school that I was gunning for. I was still like, yeah, right, exactly, like a safety, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm heading over to my barber's. I just left the gym and was getting my hair cut, like I had scheduled. And I'm sitting in the chair, and I get a phone call, and I'm like, this is their phone call to let me know, on the phone. And I get to speak to the admissions person. They get to tell me hey, you're so great, you got accepted. And she's like, oh, I got to tell you, Michael. And I'm sitting in this chair getting my hair cut. It's cutting all around my head. And I got this phone. I'm like, yeah. And I'm still got a smile on my face and stuff, waiting for her to say, you got in. And she's like, oh, there was a mistake with the computer system or something like that. And not only did you not get in, you didn't even get waitlisted. In fact, we're flat out rejecting you. And I was like, nice. And I had to
yeah, I had to be totally
you shouldn't
cool.
be able to do that.
It was something. It was because I already, like you did, right? You got accepted, and you kind of called all the important people in your life, and I got in. I'm going to be, this physician, or I made it. All my hard work paid off. All that doubt, all that worry, and I still gave it my all, and it worked out. If you do work hard enough, you really do.
It pays off. But in that case.
Yeah, and then I thought, no, it doesn't pay off. You can work as hard as you want. Nothing's ever going to work. It's very defeatist.
Devastating.
Yeah, so I had to play it cool though. He's like, oh, who was that on the phone? My barber's asking me, because probably my attitude changed a little bit. I guess maybe I wasn't as talkative. And I was like, nah, it's nobody. It's cool. Whatever, don't worry about it. It's just somebody talking about something. No, it's no big deal. And then I was just walked out of there fresh new haircut and feeling like garbage. And then just kind of really worried about, hearing back from my other schools that I wanted to hear back from. But they got back to me early, and I didn't have another interview until after that. So, kind of going through that experience and knowing that I did bad on that interview, I really, just I put effort into the application process in terms of filling out the application, writing experiences, your personal statement, just I put effort into the Mcat, I made sure to put as much effort into the interview and practicing the interview as I could. So I did just a tremendous amount of research. I did a tremendous amount of practicing and worked very hard at it to kind of deliver a polished version of myself that really would, show the school my attributes, which is a big thing. And for me, that was things like leadership and highlighting experiences and exactly why I want to be a physician without sounding cliche or something like that. But yeah. Well, listen, Amanda, thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate it. I know it's going to be a big help to a lot of people out there that are going through this process right now. And like you mentioned, it's a weird place to be because it's hard to find information or talk to people that have been through a similar thing. And I felt a little bit, maybe you could say a little bit alone during that process, and just kind of searching for any type of support or answers, really. That was a big part. So yeah, I want to thank you for being able to speak with us today and just kind of tell us a little bit about your story. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm glad I can share with the whole world.
So, all right. Thank you again, and we'll talk later, okay?
Thank you.
All right, bye.